Some of you might know where this is leading in from, but I'll give you the full show just in case you don't. You ever heard of a guy called George Wallace? George Wallace was an Alabama governor. He was a Democrat, but he was a Democrat back in the age when the Democrats were the real racist ones. Look, we have his Wikipedia page up already. Oh my God, it's like I prepare stuff. You can tell just by looking at him that he's racist. You guys know how it is. Phrenology, the something about the hair and eyebrows. I don't know, whatever. Now, he was kind of a populist. Not great on race issues, one might say. Not quite woke. I mean, you can learn about him if you really want. But what I'm interested in is a specific parallel here, okay? So George Wallace was kind of a populist type, right? I mean, he wasn't like a Democratic Party loyalist. He was, he would couch his white supremacist and white separatist language in the whole, we're not going to let these big government types tell us what we can and can't do. People, all independent, rah, we know how this dialogue tends to go. Here, he was committed to it as well. Yeah, he ran for president as an independent, ran as governor, won, earned national notoriety by standing in front of the entrance to the University of Alabama, blocking the path of black students. So if nothing else, my man is out there committed. He's on the ground. I mean, he's not just letting other people block the path of black students. He's personally doing it, which is a level of commitment you just don't get from racist politicians these days, honestly. So he was one of the longest-serving governors in U.S. history. I think nearly 2 decades he was governor, which is pretty wild. But he said something. There's the reason we're doing this, with a specific quote, okay? This man was very politically successful, okay? You gotta be, to be a governor for nearly 2 decades. There's a quote attributed to him. If I may, we'll have to mildly censor this. Some supporters were appalled at Wallace's changed political stance. See, he got more racist with time. But Dan Carter, his biographer, says in the film that Wallace had this response. I try to talk about good roads and good schools and all these things that have been a part of my career, and nobody listened. And then I began talking about N-words, and they stomped the floor. I presume that's what he sounded like. I don't know that for sure. Say it? We're not saying it. We're not saying it. Not this time. It's not tactical, folks. Come on. It's not tactical this time. You could just say it. No. He moved right with time. Yeah, he was the original Vaushite. He did say the N-word. Probably quite a lot, actually. Way more than any of you. He changed his political positions with time, mostly to appeal to the interests of the crowd. This is that faux populist right thing, where you don't meaningfully challenge systems of power, but rather reinforce them through the rhetoric of populism, Like, oh, wow, you're a governor in the South in the 1960s. You sure are sticking it to the system by being racist. You really are deconstructing the fundamentals of American society by being racist in Alabama. He used to talk about politics, but, the thing that got white voters to turn out and vote for him was talking about black people in unflattering terms. So why do I bring this up? Well, this quote is one of the few and best of the explicit examples we have of proving a point that I've been making for years, and that other people have been making for far longer than I've been alive, which is that very, very often an appeal to reactionary politics is nothing more than a cynical attempt to plate over real politics. So, real politics, real matters of power and finance are complicated. They are not always easily understandable to the voter. They're not simple. But a lot of voters, especially, again, to be clear, in this context, 1960s Alabama, like really, what actually gets at them? Well, in this case, it's black people. And what about today? Well, Donald Trump did it again. And we love him for this. We stan an honest king. Okay? Thank you, Donald Trump, for your unparalleled honesty, giving us more examples.
transgender insanity, in critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes. People go like that. Talk about transgender. Everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was? But one...
It's the same quote. It's literally the same quote. If anything, Trump is actually being more correct, because he's pointing out that this issue is so meaningless to the voter base that they wouldn't have even known what this was 5 years ago. This is why I say, and again, this is why the GOP establishment has wanted to replace Donald Trump with Ron DeSantis. It is because, you can't say this. You can't acknowledge this. Remember that right now the Republican Party is very openly committed to the culture war first and foremost, but it wasn't that long ago, just a couple of years ago, where they would pretend the culture war stuff was being exclusively promoted by the left and that they were the ones focusing on the real issues. This was back in the day when the right was still, of course, racist and sexist and blah, blah, but they would pretend that they were just trying to be responsible, state managers, and the Dems were the ones obsessed with race and gender and such and such. And of course, they do still say that to an extent, but nowadays Republicans are largely committed openly to the to the culture war, and they admit that. I mean, DeSantis says woke every other word. Like, that's all he says. He doesn't say anything but that. It's literally all he has. Trump has made fun of him for it. Trump has literally said, like, all he says, woke, woke, woke. He said that Trump has made fun of DeSantis for that. Because DeSantis is doing essentially what, George Wallace did, which is a switch from a sort of a comprehensive political strategy to, like, bottom of the barrel, lowest common denominator reactionary pandering. And Donald Trump, who is authentically a reactionary, but I don't really think he cares about it the way a lot of his supporters do. He'll just say what he wants to get an applause. He likes the accolades. I don't think that he wakes up in the morning mad about trans people. And he's slept around with a ton of people. He's probably banged some trans prostitutes for him. In his head, he's like, yeah, she was hot. But he doesn't. I don't think it occurs to him to be mad about this. Of course, for his voter base, they are. So he has to play into it. His campaign manager tells him he has to shift his behavior. He's probably had a sit down with GOP representatives saying, look, you really have to get on board with this. This is the way we're going. And Trump goes along with it, but he's just too honest to not say it. I want to play it again because it really is incredible. I'm telling you, by the way, this is going to go down in the history books the same way the George Wallace quote did. Exactly the same way. It's like the former Nixon staff member, the former Nixon administration guy who was talked about the Southern strategy and how you couldn't say the N-word anymore, so now you have to abstract it with forced busing and stuff like that. It's the same thing. Atwater, thank you, Lee Atwater.
It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes. People go like that. Talk about transgender. Everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was? But one thing critical.
It's incredible. It really is. It genuinely is. George Wallace was the front runner in 1972, but he got shot by a schizophrenic and had to sit in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Now, George Wallace was a monster, and he was aware of the fact that he was cynically and dishonestly pandering to lowest common denominator reactionary politics as a substitute for real politics, which I should note, by the way, is the opposite of populism. If you have a mass of voters who you are trying to represent as some kind of envoy of their interests, and instead what you do is you put them to sleep by pulling them away from real political issues that affect their lives and towards this makeshift fabric of made-up reactionary grievances, you're doing the opposite of populism. You're doing like the exact same thing that the mainstream media does, where they lull people into a sort of angry complacency within the status quo. You're just adjusting what the status quo is. There's nothing revolutionary about that. There's nothing reformative about that. It's the absolute antithesis of populist politics. Um, you read the George Wallace quote again? Oh yeah, the George Wallace quote. I'll just put it on screen. I don't want to read the whole thing again. You just want me to say the N word. I love how they're all laughing like they don't even know how stupid they are. Yeah, well, the laughing sounded a little bit nervous, I think. Keep in mind, the people who are there listening to Trump talk, that's not like the average Republican voter. Those are all wealthy insiders. Like, look, that wasn't a rally. That was like I mean, you can see when they pull back to the crowd here, right? Like this is yeah, these aren't like average voters. These are party insiders, or like a very small group of people. There's a social incentive to play along. But how long can this last, really? I mean, I still don't think DeSantis has a run at the presidency, not a real one. I really just don't. Whatever happens with Trump, I just do not think that's going to happen. I could be wrong. I can't see the future, but I don't think that DeSantis has anywhere near the energy or the charisma to do this. And I think that Trump is vindictive enough that even if Trump was made unable to run somehow, that he would continue to tear DeSantis down from a prison cell or from Mar-a-Lago or from whatever else, you know? So with Trump being in my opinion, the only viable Republican candidate, if Trump is saying stuff like that openly, he's basically just saying like, haha, like I talk about this because you like it, but like, you know, whatever, like it's you didn't even care before, but all right. If he's going down that road, I mean, the artifice is peeling back, is what I'm saying. The statements like what George Wallace made or Lee Atwater made are usually the kind of things that you hear about after things have started to fall apart. You know what I mean? Like, you don't really hear about insiders or the man himself, in Trump's case, going, haha, this is all fake, like while things are going up. You hear it when things are starting to tamper down. That was the case with Lee. That was the case with George, in this retrospective thing. We'll see how it goes. You know, we'll see how it goes. It's just, it's deeply funny. Yeah, laying your cards on the table after the game is over, right? And Trump doesn't have the self-control to like maintain this artifice. I don't think he can do it.